Hi, I'm Doug Rutter. Welcome to the Rebound podcast. This is episode 5 with Stephanie Valle.
Hi.
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, Doug.
So, I don't want to spend a lot of time doing the redundant stuff like when you were born and all that, but are you a native El Pasoan?
I am.
Born in
Yes.
El Paso?
Born and raised in El Paso, yes.
Yeah. Did you live in the same place forever?
Almost. I lived in, I guess, the Pebble Hills area, the old Pebble Hills area.
You were a Hanks girl, no?
I'm a Hanks grad, yes. And then during my high school time, my parents bought a house across the street from Montwood High School, but I was already at Hanks. So I said, I still want to go to Hanks. And so my mom worked at Glen Cove Elementary School, so it wasn't a big deal to drop me off at Hanks, yeah.
So I read or came across that you were interested in journalism in the 7th grade?
Yeah, and if not earlier, because I found a little notebook where I was writing headlines, I guess because when you would go through the grocery store lines, you would see the National Enquirer. And so I'd kind of look at those and I'd look at magazines and I would write headlines. And I think that notebook has, I think I had it when I was like 7. I remember getting it for a Christmas present. It was really exciting.
Really?
Yeah.
So where did it go from there?
I think in 7th grade and 8th grade, I took like an aptitude test and like, oh, you'd be inclined to study radio and television. And I got really excited because I already had an interest. So when I got into Hanks, they had a broadcasting program called Night Vision, and they would do the morning announcements. And then they also did storytelling reports. Mm-hmm. So I got into that class, I think probably my sophomore year, and then continued through until I was a senior. Wow. And then got an internship because I stayed at UTEP and I just...
Did you study journalism?
I actually did not. I was in the communications program, but they didn't have a journalism or broadcast journalism component. And so I was looking to transfer out, and then I ended up calling up my high school broadcasting teacher and I told him, I just feel like I'm like wasting my time. I feel like I should be doing something to get towards my career, and I'm not doing that here. And he said, why don't you get an internship? I can put you in contact with a couple of people I know who work in television, because he had worked in TV. And so I got in touch with the news director at Channel 7 and had an interview, and I got an internship.
Yeah, that's so weird. I wanted to be a lawyer.
Oh, okay.
And I called my high school journalism teacher. My high school journalism teacher was Sandy Messer.
Oh, okay.
The realtor.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
That is.
She was a great journalism teacher. You know, what was she, probably 28?
Oh, wow.
You know, and there we are, youngsters. So you escalate through college and you start at the very bottom at KVIA.
I did. I was an unpaid intern. I was helping write scripts for producers, and I was also running studio cameras. So
I mean, they just threw you in it?
Yeah, they were like, hey, here, this is what you do. And so I just kind of like, it wasn't just going into the newsroom and then just watching. Like I was asking people, hey, what do you do? Can I like follow you around? And what are you working on? And how did you come up with that idea? And so it was just a lot of asking questions and being curious about what everybody was doing and how do I get to do what they're doing.
Right. How long were you an intern?
I interned for about 2 months. It was a summer internship, and they hired me in August of 2001, but I was a production assistant. So I was going to be doing studio cameras because we actually still had people running cameras. And I was also going to be doing Chiron, which is essentially typing in the lower thirds on the bottom of the screen on weekends.
Right.
So really just like behind the scenes work. And then they said, well, if you're interested, you can kind of maybe just, you know, come into the newsroom and you can help write scripts. And so that's how I learned how to write scripts.
Were you happy?
I was. It was a really exciting time.
Exciting.
Yeah, because it was so new. It was like I walked into this place having gone from being in a classroom setting to actually seeing professionals, Gary Warner and Estela Casas. Yeah, like just a bunch of people that I had watched on television. I was interacting with them, and it was really great.
And so you become an anchor. And I mean, you don't just jump from that to becoming an anchor.
Yeah. No.
You're a field reporter?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And what else did you do before you were an anchor?
So a lot of field reporting. That was essentially what I did. I think because I was still in college when I was a production assistant. I graduated from UTEP in 2004. So every 6 months or a year, they would say, okay, how about you report on Saturdays? And then you can put a package together, no live reports. And then it grew, okay, you could do Saturday and Sunday. And then, are you available on Fridays to report? And so it was like one day until finally in 2003, they were going to launch Good Morning El Paso Weekend, and they asked me to anchor the weekend morning show. So it was really exciting because I was like 21 at the time. I was still in college, and I was anchoring a weekend morning newscast. So it was really exciting.
Yeah.
Everything about it was exciting. Like, I know today they're like, God, like, you didn't get paid anything and your hours were terrible. It's like, I saw it as opportunity. And every time they said, do you want to do this? Yes, I want to do that. So by the time I graduated in 2004, I was the weekend anchor on the morning, and I was reporting 3 days a week. And then I went full-time reporter and weekend anchor. And then I think I was the weekend morning anchor until about 2007. And then I did that for a short time, the evenings. And then I went to the morning show, and I was the morning reporter, and then the noon anchor and producer. So there was a lot of change. I was always at KVIA, but my roles were always changing every few years.
Yeah. So when you get to be a primetime anchor, 5 o'clock, I think the average person thinks that you pull up to the station at 4:30, park your car, walk in, and sit down and go.
Yeah.
It's not that way, is it?
No. I would start my day at 1:45 with the meeting. So I'd have to be in the newsroom at 1:45, and then it was just, talking to reporters about stories. We have a radio update that we would have to record. We're recording tease promos to push to the stories that we're going to have later in the newscasts. So it's a lot of behind the scenes work.
So your day started at 1:45.
Yeah, technically. I mean, that was my schedule because no other person works in the evening. So if someone's calling me at 9:30 and they want to talk to me about something and they want to give me information about a story, I take the phone call.
Right.
So it did feel like a lot of times I was working all day.
Right.
And again, it wasn't a big deal because I understood that I'm not going to answer my phone because my schedule doesn't start until 1:45. If you want the story, you're going to work to get the story. And then other times, like, you're just trying to accommodate people for interviews, and, I'm only available at 10 o'clock in the morning. Okay, I'll be there. And then having to get ready and go get the interview. And so it was a lot of, I guess, on my own time. And then, like you were saying, if I go in at 1:45 and I'm, anchoring newscasts, I'm done by 10:45.
Wow.
So yeah,
It's
pretty
a grueling
late.
schedule.
Yeah, it is. It is, because by the time you get home, and I'm taking off makeup and I'm changing, it's like 12 o'clock, and I'm like, man, I just wanted to kind of sit for a bit, and then next thing you know, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, I should go to bed because I have to wake up to take my kids to school at 6:30.
Did it wear you out?
I don't know if it wore me out. I guess there were some times where I was like, I feel tired. But I never got burned out. It was always worth it for you? Yeah, I didn't burn out on it. I still feel like there's still value in journalism, and there's still value in local news, and people should watch the news and pay attention to what's happening in their communities, because we are all living in this place, and we all pay taxes here, and we all work in this community, and so we should understand what's happening in the community.
I agree with you. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to find out more about the news in the community.
Thanks for getting these sub bowls.
Of course, no problem, big bro. Let's eat.
Danny DeVito? What did you do with our uncle?
Well, that doesn't matter. This is a commercial for Jersey Mike's. What matters most are these sub bowls.
Wait, has Danny DeVito been my brother my whole life?
I guess so. Don't tell Mom. Your favorite sub, hot or cold in a bowl. It's a Jersey Mike's thing. A sub above.
At Family Medicine of West Texas, we understand that your health is your most important asset. Whether it's routine care, managing chronic conditions, or just a checkup, we're here for you. Our experienced general medicine doctors take the time to listen and provide personalized care, making sure you feel heard and understood. Your well-being is our priority. Schedule an appointment today at Family Medicine of West Texas, where compassionate care meets trusted expertise. Call us at 915-581-6405 to book your appointment today.
So you mentioned, news in the community. What would you say over your entire career would be, and I'm going to exclude Walmart, but 3 stories that really impacted your life?
The first one would be it's kind of a culmination of things, but it was the execution of a child killer.
That was going to be my last segment of the podcast, but we'll go ahead. Let's do it now.
Okay.
I was chilled sitting on my couch watching you do that. And
Really?
it's something that from that day to today I've wanted to ask you about.
Oh, okay.
What was that like? I mean, did you get to see the whole thing?
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, it's a strangely sterile process. It's very, not to sound callous, but it's a very routine procedure how they handle this thing.
Yeah.
So,
Before, were you pro or pro-life? No, pro-death penalty? No death penalty?
I didn't really take any stance, and I think it's because I don't ever want to be in a position where I want to wish anything like that upon anybody, because especially in my new role with the district attorney's office and we're dealing with victims, how do you tell someone that they're wrong about how they feel? If they feel like that the person who killed their loved one deserves to die, and that is an option here in Texas, who am I to say that they're wrong? I will say that the process getting to the actual execution takes a very long time, and I don't think people fully understand that.
I remember seeing you standing outside, like on the street,
Yeah.
and just, reporting, and it was kind of like, building up and building up. And
Yes. I mean, so to get to that day, he had been sentenced to death in 2003.
Right.
So everybody had been waiting for 20 years. His conviction had been overturned. He had a retrial. He had appeals and appeals and appeals. And even that day, he had filed a last minute appeal. So that's what, going back to my point about the death penalty, is everybody thinks, he's sentenced to death. It doesn't happen the next day.
Right.
It might take 20 years. And in fact, in March, there's going to be another execution of someone from El Paso who committed really heinous crimes. And if it goes as scheduled, he will have been on death row for over 30 years.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things that I wish, like as an outsider, I'm like, I just wonder if people understand that if they're thinking death penalty, it may not happen for 10 or 20 or 30 years. And what does that do to a person who's trying to grieve?
Yeah.
So, but the actual execution, to your original question, it was a very routine process. They were like, okay, they searched us to make sure we didn't have any phones. I had to wear flat shoes and just like nothing in my pockets. I had a pen and paper. They drove us over to the chamber, and then we walked in, and I was startled. I turned a corner, and the person, his name was David Renteria, he was already on a gurney, and he had already been covered up with the white sheet. He was already strapped in. And
you were like from here to here?
Yeah, it was like from here probably to that wall over there. And it was a small room, and the victim's family members were there, and other members
you
of
talk
the
to any of
media.
them?
I did after the fact, and also before, because at that point, I was simply there as an observer, and I was just trying not to get in the way. And I also wanted to make sure, in my mind, I was like, I'm the only television reporter in English language who's in this room, and I need to make sure that I document everything that happens so that people who are at home wanting to know the outcome understood what happened. So it was just like so much just focused on like what he was saying and taking notes and getting people's reactions, and then just trying to like gauge how people were responding once they said that they were going to issue the pentobarbital, which I think it took maybe 10 minutes, and then they pronounced him. But it was a very strange experience. Something from that moment, he gave his final words.
Were you there?
Yes. So the entire...
Were you having anxiety, or were you just numb, or?
I think being a reporter, I learned very early on that I needed to compartmentalize my personal feelings.
Yeah.
With being an observer to a situation.
Yeah.
And so when I'm there, I'm not thinking about what I'm going to see. I'm thinking about how I'm going to make sure to document everything that I see. So I'm in the room, I see him there, I'm gauging reactions to everybody, from everybody. And then they start, and I'm like, okay, this is what's happening. He starts with a prayer, and he's, giving a prayer. and I'm gauging the reaction of the people in the room. And then he says, you know, to the family, I'm sorry for the pain I've caused, but he never said Alexandra Flores' name, the little girl who he had kidnapped and killed in 2001. And he, at some point, seemed to kind of blame others and blame the system. And it made me think about like how sitting in solitary for 20 years can really have an effect on people where you start to believe your own truths, right?
Sure.
And then he said, you know, I'm ready. And then he started saying the Our Father. And I think he got like one line in. I think he got to Our Father who art in heaven. And then he's like, I can taste it. And then he slurred. And then he like snored really loudly. And then just like seemed to fall asleep. And so, having never witnessed anything like this before, you're watching it and you're like, I know what's going to happen, but it looks like he's asleep. And then someone came in and pronounced him dead, like within 10 minutes. Wow. And then you're quickly ushered out of the room. The family gave a news conference. It was incredibly emotional. Again, had to separate my personal empathy and write down what they're saying and make sure we had all the video, put a story together, and then talked about it.
Did they get relief, the family?
I had asked Alexandra Flores' brother shortly after that news conference how he was feeling, and he said, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I haven't talked to him about it since, but I think that answer is, it's very telling. Like, how do you feel?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know how you get relief from something like that, because it's not like all of a sudden your loved one is back.
Yeah, no. But I remember watching the story and I would think, wow, that's the top. And for your profession as a reporter and everything else, isn't that one of the top tier stories? I mean,
I would say so. I mean,
who else gets to do that?
Well, I could bore you with the process, but it's not often that people get to go. So
You have to apply and all that.
you have to kind of apply. So what happens is
What made you want to do it?
Well, because I had covered the story initially, because in 2001, in November of 2001, when Alexandra Flores was kidnapped, I was working weekends. I was, I want to say it was, or maybe it wasn't a weekend. It was a Thursday or a Friday. It was a Friday, Black Friday shopping. And I was working production, and all of a sudden we hear like there was a little girl who was kidnapped, or a little girl who was missing from a Walmart in the Lower Valley. And I was like, that's, sounds kind of typical. But then as hours went by and she wasn't found, I was thinking to myself, this isn't anything that happens in El Paso. Like, you just don't have like a girl kidnapped. And then watching her parents plead for her to come home. We broadcast it live on our newscast at 10. And I remember watching that and I was just like, this is so crazy. Like, where is this girl? And then to only find out that her body was found the next day. I was able to report on her funeral because it was on a weekend and I was a weekend reporter. And then so it was something that stayed with me. Yeah.
You went through the whole process.
Yeah. And so it stayed with me. And then I started my Borderline Crimes podcast with KVIA. And in 2021, I revisited the case because it was 20 years later. And I knew that I wasn't alone in thinking that this was a shocking crime, because this kind of crime doesn't happen here. And so just kind of talked about how it affected the community and how is the family doing. And then when he ended up being scheduled for execution, I thought, well, I have to be there. I don't know of another reporter who had covered it. So it was all your idea? Yeah. So I approached the general manager and I told her, I want to go. And I'm going to figure out how to get over there. I just want to make sure that, we're all on board here. And she said, I'm glad you asked, because I was hoping, she didn't want to ask me to go. She was hoping that I would ask to go. So you have to write a request to the Texas Department of Criminal Justice to get on the media list. There are only 5 media witnesses allowed in the execution chamber, and one of them is from the AP. He has seen hundreds of executions. Wow. And there's another reporter from the Huntsville local reporter, or local newspaper, who always is there.
So that's 2 out of 5?
Right. And so then there are 3 other slots, and there are many other local media stations and outlets. So I quickly got on sending the letter and telling them that I wanted to be in the room, and then was told that I could be there. And it's very specific. They want to know who's going to be in the room, and you have to be from the town where the crime was committed. You can't just be like, oh, I'd like to witness this guy's murder because I've been watching his case on television. No, you have to have a connection. So I was on the list, and there was a reporter from a Spanish language television station, and then I think there was a reporter from the El Paso Times. So yeah, then just kind of worked it out from there. But I wanted to be there. I
Yeah.
felt like I had to be there.
And did you get any peace?
I don't know if peace was mine to find in that. It
Yeah.
was something that I felt like being able to cover a case from the onset to the resolution was something that it's not often found.
Yeah.
And a case of this magnitude with this kind of level of impact, I felt I don't want to say glad. I think it was just one of those things where I felt like I'm glad that I was there for our community. I'm glad that I understood the gravity of this crime.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I was able to be there and do the best that I could to let people know about what was happening.
Yeah. That's awesome. Since that day, I've wanted to talk to you about it. Isn't that funny?
Yeah, yeah.
We're going to take a break. We'll be right back.
Don't let this tax season get the best of you. Let Tax Matters provide you the help you need with your financials. We provide total financial services to individuals, business owners, executives, and independent professionals. Utilizing our services, Tax Matters will work with you to optimize your business and minimize your taxes. We'll work to provide you and your business with the tools and resources you need to build a solid tax and business foundation. If you want financial help that's affordable, experienced, and friendly, call Tax Matters today for a free initial consultation.
We're back on the Rebound podcast. I'm Doug Rutter with Stephanie Valle. Okay, so we went through the, you stole my piece de resistance story. So let's go backwards then. Let's talk about August 3rd. Was it 2019?
Yes.
Tell me what that day was like for you.
That day was actually going to be the KVIA's annual Humane Society telethon. So I had been in the mindset of going to work anyway, but with a very different purpose of like holding puppies and asking people to adopt
Was it
animals.
a Saturday?
Yeah, it was a Saturday. And then I started getting text messages from people saying that there was a shooting. And I was like, oh, maybe it's something in the parking lot. It's probably not a big deal. And then hearing, that it was much worse than we could have imagined. And then I called my news director at the time, and I said, I'm going to go in. And she said, can you come in a little bit later? I need to stagger people. Like, I already have someone here. Please come in at 2, and I'll keep you the rest of the night. And I said, okay. But I was just like, how do I not do anything? Like, what? And so I decided that was probably a good idea, but I kept abreast of what was going on. I was in communication with people I knew at hospitals. I was trying to get an idea of what was happening, and then just trying to make sure that I wasn't also instilling like some type of fear, because I think people can, as you saw, like people were starting to spiral and say that it was like numerous shooters and they were targeting multiple places. And so just trying to make sure that we weren't adding to that chaos. So getting into the station, it was, I don't know, it was just very stunning. It felt like kind of like you just, again, those kinds of things don't happen here. And I just remember thinking like, I don't understand who would have done this. Like, why would this have happened? And I remember Estella saying, this isn't El Paso. This isn't El Paso. It's not an El Pasoan. And she was right. This was someone from outside of our community. And, but the moment that I would think about that would always move me to tears, and it still kind of does, is just when we had photographers at different places, and one of them had gone to a blood bank, and people were lining up to donate blood.
Awesome.
And it was one of those things that, like, when people feel helpless, they do whatever they can, even if it's something like hospitals are going to need blood for these people. Mm-hmm. And it gave me such hope for El Paso. It made me feel like, you know, people here, like, they're good people. Like, it was, as awful as that day was, like, that was the glimmer that I had that made me feel like, you know, like, we're going to be okay. But it was a really awful day, and it still hasn't really gotten much better because, you know, we still don't have, you know, a trial date.
You know, there was a letter to the editor to the Times. I don't know if it was yesterday, the day before, but it was, the gist of the letter was, don't we have enough on the guy? Hasn't he pled enough? Doesn't he have enough life sentences? Why do we stop to prosecute him more? Federally.
Well,
which I understand the difference in federal and
right.
state. But I mean, what are we going to gain by prolonging the inevitable that he's going to get another 50 life sentences? Or is it because of the death penalty?
It's because it's a death penalty case. So, you know, and again, I work in the district attorney's office, so I have to kind of like make sure that I'm not, you know, saying anything out of turn. But there's no doubt about the culpability of this person who did this. He has already pleaded guilty in federal court. But when the state is saying we want to use the maximum punishment we have to kill this person, there are a lot of legal, constitutional things that are in place to make sure that everything is done absolutely right in order to get to that point. Because once we get into the court's side of a crime, that's when you have all of the constitutional rights to a fair trial, and there are protections for those accused of crimes, and all of those things are taken into extreme consideration when it comes to the state's ability to kill somebody. Mm-hmm. And so I say it like that because I think of the AP reporter I spoke to when I witnessed an execution. Is he's like, this is the state's biggest power, is to kill you. Wow. And we have to make sure that it is done absolutely right. Wow. Because the minute that something is done a little lax, what does that mean for our system? Right. So there's also a lot of that has to go into a death penalty trial. Like, first of all, you can't plead guilty and get the death penalty. So Patrick Crusius has not pleaded guilty in a state court. He pleaded guilty to the federal crimes of using a weapon to commit murder and hate crimes. But we're talking about capital murder of multiple persons. Mm-hmm. And that is a different charge. And he has not pleaded guilty to that. He wants to force this to go to a trial if the state wants to still continue to pursue the death penalty. Yeah. And in order to do that, there's just so much that has to go in. And then even once you get to a point where you're having a trial, you have to think about, can you get 12 people and a few alternates to say that we are going to listen to the scope of evidence? And tough. Right. Is that going to happen in El Paso? Is that going to have to be moved? How long is that going to take? So there is just, and then once you get to conviction, you're like, yes, we think he's guilty. Then there's a whole other punishment phase. Yeah. So then you have to say,
it's almost like another trial.
It is essentially another trial, because now you're having to prove like that this person is dangerous, even behind bars. Right. Are there any mitigating factors that played into the perpetrator's act? You know, those are things that the jurors have to take into consideration. Right. So there's just so many steps to get to that point. Yeah. And I understand, as a member of this community, I think all of us feel like we just want this to be over.
When I read that letter, I knew it wasn't practical, but it was sure wishful thinking. You know, that the thing could be put to bed once and for all.
Yeah, I mean, that would be like him pleading guilty if the state were to take off the death penalty, or the state dropping charges, you know, and so it's going to be up to the district attorney to decide how he's going to handle that.
Down at the district attorney? I mean, is there like a focus group, or is there like a part of the district attorney that only does that?
Well, there was definitely a focus on. There's definitely a focus on it. There's not a focus group on it, but the entire office is fully aware that this is the most prominent, most pressing case in the office.
Yeah.
But everything belongs to District Attorney
I
James
hope you guys
Montoya.
can turn it around. I think you can. We need help down there after everything that's happened.
I think that James Montoya is a very smart,
Yes.
very capable person, and he is taking everything into consideration to do the best he can.
He's the man for the job.
I
it
think
looks
so.
like.
Yeah.
So those would be your first two. What's your number three?
Gosh, that is a tough question. I did a lot of crime reporting, and so I always feel like the stories that moved me were those.
So how did Borderland Crimes podcast start?
I started listening to a lot of podcasts, and I was listening to Serial by, I think it was NPR. They did Serial. And so just listening to the storytelling, and it was just so much more in depth than anything that I had been able to do at that point in my career. And I was like, gosh, that would be really neat to be able to dive into a story like that, like the way they're doing. And I was like, well, maybe I could start a podcast. And I approached the station. And I said, this is what I want to do. And Kevin Lovell at the time, he was like, I don't know what a podcast is. And I said, but I can give you a broadcast story that also promotes the podcast. He's like, that's all I care about. So I ended up doing it that way. And I had wanted, at the beginning, I wanted to work with the police department on, just like getting ideas from them and talking to detectives about how they're investigating crimes. Didn't go as I planned for it, but they did cooperate in the beginning. So I was able to talk with detectives about certain cases they had worked that had already gone through the court system. And yeah, that's how it started.
When you were leaving the station, the big scuttlebutt around town was you were going to work for the sheriff's department.
Oh.
To do that. Exactly
Really?
what you just said, yeah.
Well, with the district
it
attorney,
fit.
yeah, I could see that. But with the district attorney's office, I'm going to try and do a podcast.
Yeah.
So yes, that's something that Deanne Montoya and I have talked about doing a podcast for the office. So.
Well, I'm not going to let you off the hook. What's the third one? Third story.
Oh gosh. Okay. I have a few in mind, but I think the one I was just talking about it the other night with someone. I covered this case about a woman who had gone missing. Her name was Erica Gaitan, and the person who was ultimately accused of her murder was someone she had gone on a date with the night that she had gone missing, and he was charged and convicted of her murder, even though to this day they still haven't found her body. So I had reached out to the family to see if they'd be willing to talk to me for the podcast. And I think what really struck me was that not only were they so determined to try to find her, but they also had to spend an inordinate amount of time having to reshape the narrative of what happened to her. Because they were like, people see her pictures on social media and they're like, she ran away. Like, she didn't want to, she's living another life. And they're like, she loved her son. She loved her son. She would never have abandoned her son.
Yeah.
Just because someone, takes some pride in their appearance doesn't mean that they're not a good mom or that they would abandon their entire life.
Yeah.
Like, she's gone. And there's very clear evidence that was presented in trial that not only prompted the police to charge the guy, but for the DA's office to take up the case and prove it to a jury. Mm-hmm. And so it made me sad that her mom and her cousin and her family not only had to tell her 10-year-old boy that his mom was not coming home, but that they're still trying to find her, but they're also having to clear the air about who she was.
Well, those are three big stories. So want to lighten it up a little bit.
Please. I was starting to...
As we come around here. So tell me, give me an example of a funny night. Okay, like one time, I was eating.
It's me. Sorry.
I was eating with Joe at Artavino's, and you came to some party. It was outside, and somebody, was it Kacherga that got married, or
Yes, Angela Kacherga.
Something, yeah. And anyway, I looked over and I thought, gosh, it's 6. I mean, how much time does she have? And then when does she have to get back here? And does she have to prepare? So And tell me a good story with you and the news and kids and schedules and running all over town. Let me have a good one.
Okay,
I know you
well-
have more than one.
Gosh, well, the latest one is I had something called President's Day off, which I've never had off before. It's a federal holiday. Apparently,
Yeah.
people get this day off. And I've not ever had this day off in my life. So, we were like, okay, no one come to work on February 20th. And I was like, what do I do with this Monday off? And so I told the kids, let's go to La Nube. And my son's in
I've
the
seen
other
the
room.
footage.
Yeah, and he's like,
You guys had a blast.
We did. He's like, I don't want to go. And my daughter's like, let's go. And I was like, we're going to La Nube. We're going to have fun. It's our day off.
Yeah.
And we went, and like within 5 minutes, he's like, I'm sorry, Mom, I'm having a good time. I'm like, good. I'm glad we're having a good time.
Is it pretty awesome?
It is really awesome. They have this 4-story structure called the Climber, and it's for all ages. Now, I should probably be a foot tall or a foot shorter to get in there because I banged my leg like climbing into it, but it's still fun like to get in there and just have a good time. And then, they spend so much time making paper airplanes and seeing how they fly. And
Yeah.
and there's a section with water where you're just like learning about, flow and sound. It's great. It's really fun.
There was a time when El Paso didn't have those kind of things.
Right.
And now we're getting those kind of things.
Yeah. We remember the Insights Museum?
I do remember it.
Yeah, it made me sad.
And what happened to it?
Well, it turned into like a mobile facility, and now it's like housed in an old school, but it's not in downtown El Paso, which is what I think part of the problem is.
It needed to be.
It needs to be in downtown.
Yeah. What do you think about downtown?
I think that it's great. I think that I remember someone saying every city has a downtown. And that's where you go if you want to do something fun and get a feel for the city. And that's why I feel like it's important to have fun things to do downtown where people can gather.
Sure.
And that's why I love the Plaza Classic Film Festival. And it's why I love Chalk the Block, because everybody comes to this place in downtown and they've done so much work to it over the decades and it looks great.
Yeah.
I love seeing when there are restaurants there. And I love seeing when people are walking around after a show at the plaza.
Sure.
I think it's great. I think it's great.
It is great. The thing they do, the Winterfest thing, is great.
I love it. Isn't that
It's
fun?
wonderful.
To see so many people out there.
It's wonderful.
I love
having fun.
when we have like a Chihuahuas game or a locomotive game, and then there's something else happening, and you just see all these people downtown. It's great.
Isn't it great? Now let's try a little sports trivia, or not necessarily sports trivia, but me being a memorabilia guy, you got a basketball the other night.
Yes, I did.
Where did that basketball end up?
That ended up in my office on the very top shelf of in my new office at the district attorney's office.
Yeah, how many do you have?
Oh my gosh, I had quite a few. I've given them since to my kids, so I probably got maybe 3 or 4
Yeah.
in my time. Yeah.
Yeah, what's your favorite sport?
Oh man, I love watching tennis. I really like watching soccer. In person, I like watching basketball, especially Utah basketball. So, I mean, I like watching sports, but if I see a tennis match on, or if I know Wimbledon's on, I'm like, oh, I gotta
Who's your
find
favorite
this.
tennis player?
Oh my gosh, that's a tough one. I think for a long time, I really liked watching like Andre Agassi. I loved the Agassi
You go
and
way
Pete
back.
Sampras. Yeah, I like watching Serena Williams, like when she was playing. Her
Excellent.
strength, her power, like she just laid
passion.
it all out there. Exactly. She was
Roger
bold.
Federer.
Roger Federer was amazing. I liked watching Federer, and I liked watching Nadal. And then I did like watching Djokovic, and I thought he was like the dark horse of all those things.
Yeah.
I love seeing just how Federer makes it look so easy. So easy.
Mechanical.
Yes. And I enjoyed watching Djokovic return. He has like the best return. He's able to get to these slams that are just incredible.
Yeah.
These serves that are just so hard to return, and he somehow contorts himself in order to do it.
So the most surprising thing I've heard about UTEP sports in a long time is that we have a hockey team.
I did not know that.
We have a hockey team, and our hockey team was #1 in the country
Wow. Maybe I did know that.
a couple years ago, and I'm a hockey team.
Yeah.
Where do they play?
Yeah.
How about you dropping the puck at the Rhinos?
That was super fun.
Was it?
I felt bad because it was my first time.
Did you walk on the ice or skate?
No, they had a rug laid out, and I
rug.
very gently walked out there. And yeah, it was fun. It's fun to watch. It's so intense. It's funny because I told you I like tennis, but watching hockey, I was like, oh my God, like, look how they're slamming into each other.
And
It's
you
like
don't even know the rules.
Yeah, no.
I don't
but,
either.
But the agility of these
It's
guys
fantastic.
to be able to they're on ice and they're skating and they're able to see this puck and still like hit it.
And hit it.
I don't understand. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Do you think El Paso supports the Rhinos?
I think so. When I was at the arena, I saw the crowd. It was a great crowd. I wish they would support them more. And I think that people will often say, like, we have a hockey team? And it's like, yeah, like, we have a hockey team. And go out there and see them.
Yeah.
Because they're amazing. They're amazing people.
Yeah.
They come from all over the country to play.
Yeah.
It's great.
And Stephanie Hahn just had her fight here.
Yes.
And quite a few people in El Paso got behind it. I was pleased.
Good. I'm glad, too. Because people can't say, like, oh, no one supports it. It's like, no, do you support it? Because people are supporting it. We need more people to support it. Just like when the soccer team, was it the soccer team from UTEP? Or no, the basketball team, volleyball team, sorry. When the volleyball team from UTEP made it to the tournament, you know, people are like, oh, I had never gone to a game. It's like, well, go to a game.
Yeah.
We should all know the seasons for sports because we all were in high school at some point and we all knew like when sports were on for the most part. Go out there and support them.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I did a podcast. I said this was my second one, but I did a podcast called DonHaskins.com.
Oh, okay.
And it's all about Coach. And
Yeah.
it's to celebrate his 90th birthday. Well, would have been his 90th birthday.
Yeah.
And I mean, I go from players all the way all the way through. I think I did 24 different guys, including Steve Haskins. But that's still up at DonHaskins.com. He was great for the city, huh?
He was. I think that he made El Paso believe in itself.
Yeah.
And I think that
That's
it's
why
so
the
important.
66 team is still viable, is
Yeah.
because it makes you believe in the impossible.
I love watching like even Glory Road and just seeing the portrayal of that. Like, you know, you don't back down. Like, you're not going to give them anything. Like, don't let anyone tell you what you can and can't do. And I
Yeah.
think that's what Coach represented.
I loved his cameo in the movie where he's doing the gas.
Is that great?
That is
yeah, it was really wonderful to see El Paso portrayed in that way.
It was
the
nice.
campus.
It
Yeah,
was good.
yeah,
It was good.
it is. It is.
And I think it's going to continue and only get better.
I hope so.
Yeah, me too. Well, I guess that's a wrap for this week. I've enjoyed you. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.